Good evening. Welcome to the Smarten show on the Messianic Lamb Network and also on Smarten YouTube channel and
Facebook group
and our School Pods Canada Facebook group. We are here to discuss with you anything educational, parenting, and we've discussed in the past. That's all in one and the same. Navigating through these times, raising young people, and being good parents and strengthening families. We try to do what we can to help you raise a healthy next generation and address issues that are out there, celebrate things that are worth celebrating, and just, be a positive influence in this world.
Well, again, we're commended to train up the children in the way that they are to go. And when they're older, we're sure that they won't depart from it. And so we like to look at various issues facing parents. You know, it's funny. Right now, we're mentoring a young couple that's about to get married. And we're going through the book Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs.
Yeah.
And we always laugh because when we went to his conference about this book, I don't know, what was it, about 15 years ago or something like that? Maybe not quite that much.
Maybe
but
less than that, but yeah, it was over 10 years for sure.
yeah, maybe about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And as he was going through all the different, talking about the crazy cycle, talking about have men have blue filters and women have pink filters. And over the 2-day conference, I mean, honestly, the two of us must have gone like, we were just talking about that. We were just having that exact conversation. And so it's quite apparent that the vast majority of couples face predominantly the same issues. Like if you had to choose 8-10 issues that come up, and even maybe, 5, 6 or something like that, most married couples are going to be facing one of those or multiples of those issues.
Also, dynamics in a family tend to
they don't change all that much.
Be very similar in different families. Obviously different cultures, different backgrounds, address them differently, but the conflict itself, the issues that come up, and it's just having two people come together and navigate two different wants and needs and just understanding of things.
Because the core issue of sin is all driven by selfishness. And so selfishness is going to manifest itself in not too many different ways. I mean, you can kind of break it down to a core of issues, and it's going to manifest. The circumstances might be different, but the core issue is still going to be that. And so if we become familiar with those things, so it's kind of the same thing when it comes to what today's topic is, conflict resolution.
Yes.
And, families, and anytime you have two people, at some point in time, inevitably, you are going to have the dreaded C word. It's conflict.
Right. As the Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered. Except the version outside the Bible is there will be politics, there will be conflict, there will be something to resolve, right? And actually, the reason I was inspired today for the topic of our show is because in our society, it seems that we are divided. There are two sides and really strongly opposed sides on a number of issues that are happening, be it politically, medically, and financially, whatever. There seems to be like two really, opposite, polarized sides. And in our society. And the thing is, we are hoping to resolve issues within our countries, our communities, but really where we have to start is figuring it out at home.
Well, and, that makes total sense because the society is based on the foundation of the family. And the
Yes.
reason why there's such a war on the family right now is because if you can destroy the family unit, you destroy all of society. God created society to be built on the family. And so when you have strong, healthy family units, it's much
Mhm.
harder to gain control. And, what you said is that growing up in communist Eastern Europe, the one thing that enabled you to endure the hardships and the
Yes.
brutality of a totalitarian regime is the fact that
Yeah.
the family unit was still based on the biblical model of two parents, and divorce was of course frowned upon. I mean, even your parents got divorced, and that was
Yes.
a scandal really back in the time that it happened
It
in the
was a shame.
70s.
It's
Yeah,
failure. It was really not being successful at
yeah,
something that is important in the core of society. And so definitely, yes, my grandparents were like, oh, they were hurt, it was, and divorce is painful and hurt. And and so many times I know a lot of couples go to counseling, go to a mediator, and try to resolve it.
yeah.
um, but a conflict arises from deeper issues. So really we can be given strategies of how to resolve it, but it really starts with changing within ourselves and viewing things differently, I guess.
Well, the biblical model for marriage, for instance, is that we submit to one another in the love of Messiah. And then you have wives submitting to the husband's authority, and then husbands loving their wives sacrificially, even to the point of laying down their lives for them. But, what it's saying is that if you submit to one another, if I'm looking after your needs first and you're looking after my needs first, then both of our needs get met and everybody's happy about it.
Mhm.
But if you're fighting for your needs at the expense of mine, I'm fighting for my needs at the expense of yours, then
Yes.
that's where conflict arises. And so, conflict at the core is two people who are fighting over an issue, and they're looking at it from their perspective first. And the Bible
Mhm.
says, regard one another as more important than yourself. And so if we have an others focused view as opposed to a self-focused view, then a lot of conflict disappears. But because selfishness is endemic, it is a natural consequence of a sin fallen world. You're going to run into it at some point in time. The honeymoon phase is going to be over at some point.
Yes. And if that comes in all relationships, it doesn't have to be only a marriage relationship.
Yeah,
How much workplace conflict have you heard about? Or,
yeah.
social groups or whatever, it arises everywhere. And one of the things is when we define something as conflict, there has to be a perceived problem.
Right.
We perceive that there's a problem, and often um, we really need to pause at the point and decide, is this really a problem, or am I making it? Because, and we've spoken in the past about emotional intelligence, and really having ourselves examine a situation, um, considering our emotions, but outside of our emotions.
Hmm.
What is right to do in a situation despite how we feel about it, right?
Yeah.
And I know from young age we tell children, if they do something right, hurt somebody's feelings, or somebody, they'll say apologize, and I don't want to.
Exactly.
And the thing is, though, we do have to decide that when there's a conflict, we have to have an end in mind. Like, we want to resolve, we don't want to have a problem, we want to have
Well,
a solution.
conflict resolution begins with the desire to resolve the conflict.
Right. So there has to be a
Yeah.
desire. And
That's first and foremost.
yes, so there's, and today we're going to talk about adult version of conflict resolution, how to approach it, like we said, the workplace or amongst adults. And then, because I work with children, I will also present of how are we going to teach our children, because you know what? The reason adults today don't know how to resolve conflict is because they never practiced it and were taught how to do it as a child. And or a lot of people, a conflict is not pleasant, and a lot of people spend more time avoiding it rather than trying to work through it and come up with a solution, come up with something that is better than already is there in the situation.
Yeah. And if you go back to our couple of broadcasts we did a couple of weeks ago on the different temperaments, you understand that dealing with conflict based on different personalities and stuff like that is huge. So understanding someone's temperament and temperament
Yeah.
mix will make conflict resolution a lot easier. I
Yes.
was just having breakfast with a couple of guys today that I have a weekly Bible study with.
Mm,
And I was explaining that actually they have asked me to do a teaching for our Bible study on the temperaments.
yeah.
And I said, when it comes to conflict resolution, and the one guy that I was talking to, the other one had left by this point.
Mm.
And I said, because we're, wait,
Bless you.
pardon me, because the two of us are both the choleric temperament, I said that I can come to you, and because you're insensitive, meaning that you're not sensitive,
Meaning that emotions
yeah,
are not
it doesn't rule his decision making.
yes.
And that I said I can be quite upfront and honest with you and say, well, what you're doing is stupid. And he kind of said, yeah.
You
it,
can tell.
it wouldn't offend him. So I know that when it comes to conflict resolution, I can be upfront, I can be honest, I can be straightforward. We can get right to the core of the issue, and it's
Mhm.
not going to cause hard feelings. But
Yeah.
if you've got someone who's been traumatized, if you've got someone who is maybe more of a melancholy temperament, you got to kind of, third party it. You have to be hypothetical about it, because if you're that direct and what they would consider to be brutally honest, um, keeping in mind that everything's got to be done in love, but
Yeah.
there are certain people that just can't handle the direct approach.
Yeah. And so personality does play a big factor, but I believe also practicing conflict resolution before the conflict arises, before tempers flare, before
Yeah,
feelings get all offset.
yeah,
We have to have some decisions made ahead of time
yeah,
when we are not in the moment. What are our options? How do we want to deal with things? And this is why at our school pods, I actually insist that all the pods have this teaching
oh yeah.
and it gets practiced, because um, we don't make good decisions when our emotions are a little bit hot.
No, we do not. As a matter of
And we don't
fact,
say nice things, and we don't
well, if we get caught up in the moment
yeah.
and we are making emotional decisions, and I've said this before, one of the most amazing things I ever heard, I was preaching at a church
Mhm,
uh, about 21 years ago, and the pastor got up before the congregation,
mhm.
mostly young people, and I was about to do my message, but he said he was kind of ministering to them, and he said, "Your feelings are going to lie to you every day about what you want."
Yeah.
Because our feelings are usually based on us and what we need and what we want,
The
and whether
flesh.
we're offended or not, or
Yeah.
these different things, as opposed to what may be right.
Yeah.
And then we have to take into account that, hurting people hurt people, so that if someone is particularly rough on you, like I'll give you an example.
We feel we're justified to hurt them back, and it's not the right thing.
Or no, but I mean, to give an example, I was talking with a
Yeah.
friend of mine yesterday. He's down in California, and he's been very badly hurt. His family was broken up through no fault of his own. It was other people who were involved. Well, I just found out recently that his 29-year-old son just suddenly died.
Mm.
And it turned out that he was on a medication that neither his son wanted to be on or this guy wanted him to be on. But he was kind of pushed by the rest of the family, and it ended up causing a thrombosis,
Mm.
which caused him to bleed out in the middle of the night.
Mm.
And this guy is absolutely devastated. Um, his family was taken away from him. He didn't see his kids for 10 years. He finally reconciled with them just 2-3 years ago, and now his son's been taken away from him, and he is madder than a hornet. And so when I was on the phone with him yesterday, I mean, he was swearing,
Right.
he
And
was
he doesn't
venting.
tend to do that.
No,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't directed at me. He was
No.
just, you could tell he was just grieving. He's angry. And all I could do is I could just sit there and say, like, I'm so sorry all of this happened.
Well, but he could also look from a positive perspective that he actually had a chance to spend time with his children before his son's death. And listen, no parent can accept their child's death.
You should never have to bury your kid.
Yes. But at least, he was given, and you see, that's the thing, it's hard for us to remember the good things about the situation when it's so painful.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to start, and I think I sent it to you. But the way I present conflict resolution to young children
Yeah.
is it's called the conflict resolution map. So I sent you a PDF on that. So
okay, so we're gonna share the screen. We're
Do you
gonna
have
go to the window.
okay.
This one or this one?
The other, not this one, but
Okay. And so then we're going to have this.
it's a map. That's my email. That is not.
Why is that up there? We don't want that.
Yes, we don't want
Okay,
my
so we're
email
gonna
to
stop sharing that.
Okay, isn't it on the PDF? Do you have it on a PDF?
Oh, here it is. That one?
Yes, this is
Okay.
the one. Yes.
All right, don't leave the studio.
Okay. Yes.
Share screen.
See, you
window.
can tell our technology. So I really go into can you kind of maximize and take take that out of the PDF so that doesn't. I mean, we can go through it like that. I just didn't think that people need to see. Yeah, that. Okay, much better.
Okay.
All right, conflict resolution. So, and I'm going to start with point number 1 here on the screen. And this is where we usually go, but my parents don't do that all the time. The adults around me don't do that all the time. They just keep, So that is probably step number 1 of conflict resolution, is the hardest one, which is get calm first. And
what was it Elmo said?
Get yourself together.
Yeah, get yourself. There was an Elmo skit one time.
There was a character.
And one of the puppets was
Honker. It was his name.
He was honking because he was all upset, and Elmo just says, "Honker, get yourself together."
With that voice.
Yeah.
So the first thing and this is something you and I actually experienced just recently. We were starting to get upset about something in a conversation. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we should have stopped this and said, no, we have to get calm before we continue this conversation, right?
Yeah. Well, someone was being recalcitrant, and then we realized what was going on.
And anyway, but this will happen. People will say things that upset you, and you disagree on things. And I know they'll repeat themselves, even though you said, I don't agree with you, whatever, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we were getting upset. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, we should have gotten calm first and said, we need to stop.
I was calm for a while, and then when we were whacking our heads,
we just need to stop. And I will go over. I also sent you something about the problem solving wheel, what are our options? But the first thing we need to get hold of is our calm, our peace again.
Yeah.
And this is where, and so for each step that is on this map here, I teach then a separate teaching on what are some things I can do to get calm. So do a breathing exercise. How many times we just need to remember to breathe, because if we control our body functions, the way, the breathing, that kind of affects our mood. So breathing, counting to 20, which makes us pause before speaking out.
Or 200.
Or whatever your level is, count to that number.
What's interesting is that one of the descriptions of God in the Bible is that he's, most of our translations will talk about he's patient or he's long suffering.
Yeah.
But in the Hebrew, it's actually erech apayim, which means long of nose, because Hebrew is a very descriptive language. And so what it denotes, or what it gives the picture of, is slow, steady breathing, that the nostrils are kind of going in and out. Whereas anger in Hebrew is about the flaring of the nostrils, kind of like a
Right.
bull going.
So getting calm involves getting your breathing under control
Because
first.
when you start breathing deeply, and this is something that most of us do very
It's a
poorly.
calming process.
Well, because what you do is you put extra oxygen into the body,
Yeah.
and you flood the organs with it, but you also flood your brain with oxygen. And
So you can think more clearly.
right, because when you cut off oxygen, usually through slow, rapid breathing, you're not getting sufficient oxygen, which produces that's why meditation, whether you get into all the new age stuff or whatever, it tends to help health. It has health benefits because you're slowing the body's metabolic rate down, you're flooding it with oxygen, and you're slowing it down. And oxygen has a healing effect. So a deep breath is your most effective weapon against conflict spinning under control, but also for health reasons.
Absolutely. So, in classrooms or group settings, a lot of teachers that now I know they have something called a calm corner. When
Mhm.
you're not feeling calm, you can go ahead and have like fidget toys, and you do your breathing there, squeeze something, just anything that calms you down. So, others is get a drink of water.
Yossi used to call his closet what?
Oh, panic
The
room.
panic room.
The panic room. Yeah. But so there needs to be a space where it's a safe space where you can calm yourself down. It's a calming place. The other one says, place hands over your heart, and just really be aware of your body. And so biblically, I relate that to, it's almost like holding each thought captive, like capturing your thought, like catching it before it runs off on you,
Mhm.
and doing things that it shouldn't do, like your thoughts. Because remember that our feelings, make us then have thoughts, which then will have us, you went through that sequence of things, and then that causes actions, and the actions form habits, and it's a sequence of things.
Right.
So we need to really learn to catch ourselves, catch our feelings, catch our thoughts, and just say, okay, what am I feeling now? And just but the very very first thing is just try to calm yourself down before you continue. And sometimes, I describe it to kids. If you feel that like really fire coming up your belly or something like that,
Mhm.
that is the time to say, ooh, I'm feeling this thing, and this is not a good feeling. I need to go and do something else.
Mhm.
So and so that is step number one. And that is usually the step when the kids say, yeah, well, my parents didn't, calm down before they talked to me or before they talked to each other. And
No, because you can never resolve conflict when you are captured by your emotions.
yeah.
And if you are there's two primary negative emotions that drives everybody, no matter what your temperament. It's either fear or anger. The extroverts will be more prone to anger. The
Right.
introverts more prone to fear,
And psychology calls it fight or flight.
fight or
So,
flight.
so that is when we are under strong emotions, a stressful situation, we would tend to want to do one of those things, but neither one of those might be the appropriate thing to do at the neither
Yes,
fighting or running.
because if you're driven by anger as a negative emotion, then what you will
Yeah.
end up doing is lashing out. You'll say something you're going to regret. You're going to hurt someone. It could be physically. I mean, there are a lot of people who are prone to violence,
Yeah.
and they lose their temper. And but fear, you either shut down, you get passive aggressive, you walk away from the situation. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember my mother, um, when she would have a disagreement with me, there was
Mm.
one time literally where she started a conflict with me. So she went and lobbed a couple of
Mm.
verbal grenades, but then she didn't want to deal with the conflict. She literally ran into another room.
So she went into a flight, and
Yeah.
she ran out.
Except it was only a 3-bedroom apartment. And I said, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not going to start this and then,
Well,
run off on me like
and
that."
that's the thing. We have to make sure we face our conflict when we are ready, right? And when we're feeling strong emotions, we probably, it's not a good time. And I know, because I read a lot what happens in classrooms, and in schools now is a big issue in classrooms where children are not really taught, or it's highly stressful. They're not taught how to calm themselves first or whatever. And so the children diagnosed with this, that, and the other thing.
Mhm.
But I have seen trash classroom by kids who were having a rage attack and they have to
Well,
evacuate a classroom,
there was just this situation, I guess it was about 6,
Yeah.
8 months ago or something like that, where this kid had his iPod or whatever it was taken away from him by the supply teacher or substitute teacher or EA or whatever it was. And this kid was about 6'6". He was a good 225, and he went and he pushed her down and started stomping on her. She ended up having to go to the hospital, and he ended up getting convicted and thrown in jail because he almost beat her to death.
And this is what I teach children, right now. You might have, you may be grounded or whatever, like that could be the consequence. But later
Mhm.
on as an adult, how you act and what you do to others, it will be now judged by the law, and so you have to learn to do it now because well, you know, well, I can't get arrested now, Yes, but if you don't learn how to do it now,
You will get
you will.
arrested.
And this is one thing we really miss out on. Oh, they're still young, they're still young. No, it's never too early to start this conflict resolution and getting yourself calm. And I know, and so this is where we go into emotional intelligence and all these things. So there's just so much, just that conflict resolution map can lead to so much.
Mhm.
Social emotional learning, SEL, is one of the things that is a big buzzword now in education.
Yep.
Um, I'll move on to step number 2, which is figure out if this is a small problem or a big problem.
Mhm.
And I know when I first introduced this map to to the pond last year, we realized that sometimes we don't really have a really clear idea of what's a big problem, what's a little problem, or if it is a problem
Yeah.
at all. Okay, so this is where, now that we've gotten our breathing and emotions under control, we start the thinking process.
Mhm.
How big of a matter is this that I'm dealing with? Like, is this like life threatening? And I actually, so now we can go to the other page that I sent you. And so kids, I realized that, we were talking about, well, my pencil broke and I can't write down, like, I'm, the class is about to end. How big is the problem? This one gets, oh, it's a huge problem. And I'm like, okay, I think we need to have a table where we discuss how big our problem is.
Okay.
And so actually I want to start. So it's almost like, hurricanes and earthquakes, they have a scale. And it
Okay.
was funny because actually it wasn't funny because actually I was teaching this chart here right after there was an earthquake in Turkey, or anyway, there was an earthquake somewhere that
In
happened.
Turkey.
And I talked to them about, there's, earthquakes, and so our emotions can cause earthquakes,
Mhm.
and so our how big is our problem has a scale from 0 to 5, and 0 is, this is not really it's a glitch, it's not really a problem, don't really need help, we can fix it on our own. So dropping your pen or not being the first in line, or if the schedule during the day has to change,
Oh.
um oh, we need to probably
Yeah.
remove ourselves so people
There we
can
go.
see that. Okay, this is what I'm referring to.
Yes.
Like 0 in our problem solving scale, it's just a glitch. And so it's a minor inconvenience, but it's not a problem. We don't need to react to that. We could just, okay, let's pick up the pen. Let's line up where we are at, or let's be, okay, change the schedule. It's not a big deal. It's not going to affect my life.
Mhm.
Then we're moving to number 1 on our problem scale, which is a little problem. So you need a small amount of help, or
Mhm.
remind them from an adult. Oh, what do I do again in this situation? Like, sometimes kids forget. A lot of times kids forget. They don't understand the assignment, what they were told to do, the task. Lost something that you really like. And sometimes kids can, be emotionally attached to these things and could feel like a big problem, but it is not really a big problem. I actually see ads, moms all the time. We lost our favorite bunny. This is what it looked like. Can somebody tell me where I can get another one? Like, this is a problem, but it's still a little problem. So we could problem solve here. It is not really a big deal. We're moving to number 2 on our scale, medium problem. We need a little bit help from an adult now. Now we need somebody to guide us. Remember, up to the age of 25, frontal lobe is not fully developed. Um, Adults, older people need to guide younger people on
Hmm.
what to do in these situations. So when you're feeling sick, when because we get grumpy when we feel sick. um,
The man cold.
the man cold, right? Anyway, having to work with someone you don't like or having to do something you don't like. It's a bit of a problem, but it is not something that is a big deal. You can think of some things, or you may want to think of some things that you could do to make it a little bit better, a little bit
Hmm.
easier to deal with the situation. It takes a little bit of thought now, and it's not as an immediate kind of solution. Then we're moving into number 3 on our scale, a big problem. Um, this is where we need to have somebody help us navigate this. It's argument with a friend. Okay, like my best friend and I are fighting. This is not good. It's affecting my day. Like now it's a bigger deal because that person is important to us. Someone is saying something mean to you. It affects our feelings, right? And we start feeling bad about ourselves. And
Hmm.
so it's starting to affect our thought process. That's where, again, and this is a scale for children, but adults can use that if they want to. They
Well,
just need a help from another adult that is
or maybe a kid.
whoever's more mature and experienced than you. But and this is where I find children actually have easier time asking for help than adults in many, many situations because we as adults think we have to have this figured out. No, you don't. But especially when it's something in life that happens that it is disturbing. It is affecting
Well,
your how you
or sometimes you just don't have the emotional tools to deal with that. And so there was a period of time where you and I were going through a kind of a phase where we weren't able to get beyond where we were. And even though you and I mentor others, we pastor others and everything else, we hit a point where we reached the end of where we were at the
of what we
time.
knew. What we knew was,
And
we could use to solve some of the issues we were having.
yeah, and so, I called up a friend of mine. He was a psychologist,
Mhm.
and he got on a Zoom with us, and he said, "Okay, okay," and da, da.
That would be
And
the argument with a friend. So you and I were arguing. And
yeah, and
what did he say? That was the best solution I've had.
flip a coin.
He says, "Well, you have to classify. Is this a big deal? Like,
Right.
is it something that is not as important in the long run?
Yeah.
Then flip a coin. Roll a die, whatever. Do something. Rock paper
Yeah.
scissors. It's a big problem, but it could still, instead of trying to solve it with your emotions, just decide I'm going to do this really quick thing and I'm going to go with it. Now, if it's an argument of friend and it's a complex situation, then please
Yeah.
get somebody to help you navigate through that because through your feelings at this point,
Yeah.
you may need an outside perspective. So we have a big problem here. Number 4 is massive problem. Did you want to say before I go to this number
Well,
4?
yeah, and I mean, I think we met with him that one time, and that was it. I mean, or I think maybe we met 2 times. I can't
A
remember.
couple of times.
But
Yeah.
it was once or twice, and then when we kinda got over it, we were able to move forward. So, and there's no sh we
We
what we
can get
have
stuck sometimes.
what we have to remember is that there's no shame in admitting that I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah. And that's one thing, and I think a lot of times we treat God that way. We kind of hold back. It's like, oh, I can figure this out. But God wants us to get Him involved and pray to Him, and He could point out through circumstances.
Well, what Yeshua says is, "Without me, you can do nothing."
Yeah,
So, God has designed our lives that yes, we can be independent and we can be self-sufficient, but the reality is that He has designed us to be dependent and reliant upon Him and wanting us to go to Him because if we try to do things on our own, then ultimately we're going to be dissatisfied.
right. And so in this big problem situation, yes, our well-being is being affected because it's important to us, the person that we need to resolve things with, or um how are we thinking about ourselves. Then we're moving on to number 4, massive problems. So that where you need a lot of help from an adult, someone is hurt, things are being destroyed. Now it's kind of like the basic needs are not being met, and we are now in a place where it's not only our mental health being, but physical health, well-being, and health
Mhm.
and well-being is being affected. And we know that when our health starts going, that is, we need lots of help with that, and somebody to support us through that.
Yeah.
And then we go into number 5, which is emergency. That's serious helps needed, probably from a professional at that point.
Well, I'm not sure how anybody can help you in a tornado.
Right. Well, tornado, earthquake, car accident. So this is where and this is where they say as a family you need to have emergency procedures. Everything, we need to have these crucial conversations in our family. Hey, in case of this, it's not likely to happen, but if it does,
Yeah.
because things happen to people who think it's not going to happen to them, right? So car accidents, immediate danger, and so forth. Definitely at that point, I think anybody should be asking for help and dealing with that with other people. um so that is, and so I would have this, how big is my problem scale
Mhm.
in our classroom, in our home, anywhere, just so we could be reminded. Because sometimes, and after I presented this to our pod, and things would come up during the day because you have kids, no, I don't like this. I'm like, okay, let's go back, let's look at where would we classify a problem on that scale. And sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I was being silly, overreacting, right? It's
Because
sometimes
with one kid, it was like 5 every time.
it's like, it's emergency. No, 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 no. It is not. All right, so we can go back now to our conflict resolution steps. And like, so these steps, 1 or 2, like getting calm and really assessing what the problem is and what do we need
Yeah.
to resolve it, is the bulk of our the first 2 steps in the conflict resolution, the first steps. And then try a peaceful problem solving trick.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of success books call it a win-win solution.
Mhm.
Okay. Like you said, in a conflict, the reason there's a conflict because somebody's trying to get their thing at the expense of others,
That's right.
and others' well-being or interest and so forth.
Mhm.
So we always have to think, okay, if I want to get what I want out of this, I need to offer them something that makes it actually a positive thing for them to give me what what I
Yeah,
want.
if the reason why we get mad at someone else is because we believe that we are being taken advantage of or taken for granted, or that someone is trying to get something out of us unfairly.
Yeah. And this is esteeming one another above ourselves really helps, because if you show that you care for somebody's needs or wants or
Mhm.
values, then they will more likely show that care back to you. Now, there are rare situations when people want, but you try, you know, and the Bible says that you go to the person that you have a problem with, you try. Your
Yeah.
first obligation is to try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's something that you deal with in the next steps.
Mhm.
Anyway, and look, number 2 on trying to solve a problem is flip a coin or do rock, paper, scissors. And I give this to kids, but you and
Mhm.
I in our married life had to be reminded that we can do that too if it's not a problem. And then ignore what's annoying you. Sometimes if it's not such a big a problem, you're just feeling annoyed, but does it really even deserve the attention and the energy that you're willing to put into it just because it's annoying?
Mhm.
I know I have in our classroom kids pick music during lunchtime, and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't like each other's music choice. It's not a problem. It's
Yeah.
just like, you have your turn, don't you worry.
Mhm.
Talking it out with I messages. So a lot of campers use that. Instead of us going to blaming the person, you did this, you did this. I feel this when this happened, and
Mhm.
this is how I would like it. So this is where not only are we lashing out, we are not lashing out at a person, but we're saying, I felt this. And sometimes the
Mhm.
person would say, I didn't intend to make you feel that way. It wasn't my intent.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're like, "Oh, is this how you got what I said or did? That
Yeah.
was totally not what I was doing." So sometimes we misread the person's intentions. And so if we use the I messages, it will become more clear what's going on in our brain and what's going on in their brain.
Mhm.
It's a helpful thing.
Mhm.
Um, do something else. Sometimes you need to just walk away from the situation, get back to it. How many times have we build IKEA furniture and we had to walk away? Things like
IKEA
that.
furniture makes you do that. That's
but
why I
you
have a punching bag
but
downstairs.
that's the thing. We often have to do things in our life that could be frustrating because not a lot of things don't come easy in life, right? Sometimes, how many times we have walked away from something, come back, and it's like, oh, I didn't see this last time. Look, that was actually not as bad as I
Yeah,
thought.
it depending on what state the brain is in, a lot of the solutions to our problems will come when we're in a more relaxed state because the brain waves are a different length. When
Right.
when you are awake and alert and conscious, usually after your second cup of coffee, you're on the
Fully conscious.
you're on the alpha waves, and so they're short, they're much faster. The beta waves are when you're kind of in a relaxed state.
Yeah.
That's usually when you're watching TV or something like that. But in the sleep state, you're either in theta or delta, if I'm not mistaken.
I gotta review that. I did study psychology.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of times where if you're sleeping or you're kind of in that pseudo, resting state, and all of a sudden a solution will come. I've had some of my best inspiration at 3 o'clock in the morning where I'll just be, kind of sleeping or trying to get to sleep or whatever, and all of a sudden a thought will come to me. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a great idea. And the reason was is I wasn't trying.
Right. Sometimes we just have to just stop, and that's the thing. The next option says say words that mean no, and this in the adult language, excuse me, in the adult language, this means setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have to compromise our well being because somebody, is wanting something, but we also have to have healthy boundaries, right? So we don't have to give in. We don't have to say no completely. Maybe not now, or let me think about this. Say just something, just give me some time.
Yeah.
um, and then also make sure that you're listening to the other person.
Yeah.
So it's good to express yourself,
Mhm.
but we have to listen to the other person, make sure to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Now, that
Mhm.
is where a lot of people have difficulty because it is hard to come out of our skin
Mhm.
and to put ourselves in another person's skin.
Unless you're a lizard.
Right. Well, that's a different thing. Um, I'm talking metaphorically here, but anyway, you're being funny. So, so
Gotta
this
keep it
is
light.
a lot of adults even have the issue of that because we know our world and our mind so well, but it just takes so much emotional intelligence
Mhm.
and so forth to start thinking, what? But this is where we apply treat others the way I want to be treated. Wait a
And
minute.
that's called the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And so the question that I often ask people when a conflict comes up is, well, how would you feel if that was done to you?
Yeah.
And the response is usually, well, not very good. I said, okay, so why'd you do it then?
Right, exactly. So we really need to, think, okay, if somebody did that to me, like that alone would really solve a lot of problems right there. And
Mhm.
and then the next option is to share or take turns. So say, hey, you know what? You can have this now and I can have it later. Like, it's not a big deal. And the last one is apologize. That on its own now, because sometimes when we stop and think about, oh, wait a minute, I kind of reacted a little bit too much here. I'm sorry.
Yep.
But the thing is, I'm sorry only doesn't. And so there's actually a little scenario there. I should probably post that. But there's a little, it's more than I'm sorry because we tell kids, say, I'm sorry. And that doesn't really do it. You actually have to be specific what you apologize for. What is
Yeah.
it that you did?
Mhm.
And you don't have to go elaborate. Just recognize that you did something. What was it? And then um, ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, because asking for forgiveness takes it just beyond. You might be sorry that you got caught. You might be sorry that someone got upset. You might not be regretting what you did and
Yeah.
recognize. But if you say, you know, would you please forgive me? That means that you are acknowledging that somehow or another that you trampled on this person's rights.
Right. And then you giving them a little bit of empowerment to kind of make a decision and to participate in this
Right.
situation and do something positive in
And
it.
when people refuse to apologize, it's because they have pride. Because we all make mistakes. We all get it wrong sometimes. And it's understandable, especially if you're in a difficult or challenging situation, to get into the flesh and respond in a selfish way, whether it be through anger or fear.
Right. Just sometimes you didn't do anything wrong. You just overreacted. You can
Hmm.
apologize for that
Yeah,
because we all do. Our
I
emotions just
had to do that on many an occasion. You know what? It's
yeah.
something that I struggle with at times, and that I'm attempting to
Yeah.
work on to kind of get control of that.
Yeah. So we can take that off. So that is just kind of going through the discussion of this chart that I just shared with you on the screen could really prepare young people and adults, really a family, of what are we going to do. And this is where family values and family rules and things can come into play
Yeah.
when you start going through this step-by-step process of conflict resolution before the conflict arises.
Hmm.
I think that is valuable. Their uh, children need to be taught what can they do, because otherwise they'll just listen to their little bodies and emotions of what they want to do. And that's, I think, how we end up with classrooms that are destroyed and so forth.
Hmm.
That kids not feeling safe. And we've some shows ago we've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
We want to make sure that that is being met as we are dealing with conflict.
Hmm.
You do have a book here that now it's probably will appeal more to adults.
Hmm.
Um,
And it's called Conflict Resolution, um, eight
Vital
vital principles.
principles. Yeah.
And so it's a very simple book, and you can actually go through Life Leadership Essentials series where they have all kinds of stuff on
Yeah.
what do you call it, leadership principles. But prerequisite A is directly and immediately address the appropriate party instead of dwelling on the hurts.
Right. And so as we talk to the temperaments, some people would dwell on an issue rather than address it. Some people will address it the wrong way.
Yeah,
So the word appropriately, address them appropriately is yeah, something again has to be practiced ahead of time, because when things happen you might address it, which
yeah,
is according to this book, but then it might not be appropriately, so
yeah.
you have to have both of
And
those in there.
and not dwelling on the hurt is
Yeah.
really key, because that's where a lot of people really struggle, is that they focus on the offense, and a lot of time motive is ascribed to what, I mean, you and I do this to each other all the time. Well, when you said this, you meant this.
Yeah, and
No, I didn't.
we usually misunderstood how many times when you actually get into a conversation about it
Hmm.
and without the emotion describe your perspective. It's like, oh, no, that wasn't it at all.
Yeah,
And of course conflict resolution also involves having good intention towards people, because if you
yeah.
have evil intentions, then
Well,
that's
and
not going to work.
yeah, and in the Love and Respect book, one of the things
Yeah.
that they say is that they automatically now assume that the other person had good intentions, regardless of whether they respond in the wrong way. What they're doing is they're taking out the motive factor, which is what really gets people
You may
upset.
have meant this well, but this is how it came across to me, like I statements, right?
Right.
What's another prerequisite for conflict resolution?
Discuss concerns with the other party instead of gossiping. That's a biblical thing
Oh,
that in Matthew
yes.
18, verse 15, it says, if your brother offends you, you go to him.
Yeah.
And it's in the active, imperfect tense, which means that you keep going to him. So it's not like, well, maybe, it's not the right time. Maybe, the one party's busy. So if you go and you try
Yes.
a number of times and that doesn't work, then what you do is it says that you take along two or three eyewitnesses, someone who was a party who saw the
If
event.
there's a witness, then you can bring them
Not
in.
someone who's just going to agree with you. You're going to go get your buddy down, in the next cubicle over, or you call up your girlfriends and start saying,
Oh,
I
how
gotta
could he?
because that's what wives tend to do, or girlfriends. They tend to collaborate together and they complain about their significant other. That's not what it's talking about. It's someone who actually witnessed it, who saw the event, so that they can verify, because it says that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses will a matter be established. If there was no eyewitness, then at that point you have a choice. You can either escalate it by getting like an authority figure involved,
Arbitrator, or somebody who is equipped to
or
do something about
you
it.
can choose to walk away, be the offended party, and let it go.
Right.
Okay, live and let live. In the biblical model, if you don't have 2 eyewitnesses, or the person still isn't willing to deal with it, the next level is, it says you bring it to the church. That doesn't mean you stand up in the middle of the service and you air out your dirty laundry. What it's talking about is the leadership. You go to the pastors, you go to the rabbis, you go to the elders, you go to the spiritual leaders and say, here's the issue. Here's how I've tried to resolve it. What do we do? And at that point, like if you, for instance, have 2 siblings, okay, and those 2 siblings are fighting, then you go to the parents. The parents are the authority figure.
Yeah.
You bring them together and you say, okay, we're going to sit down. We're going to hash this out. I used to work with one lady, and she said that when her 2 kids, daughter and son, were younger, they would get into a fight, and what mom and dad would do is they would take him downstairs, put on boxing gloves, and say, have at it. And she said by the time they were done, they were usually laughing so hard that they don't remember what they were mad about.
and I was gonna say, like, if you're to go to someone who wasn't privy to what happened, right, you still have to go to someone who
It's
kind
a
of
trusted authority.
who knows both sides well, and can make a good call. Because I have got to tell you, this is a big thing right now, especially, I don't know, not especially, but sometimes there's buzzwords that people use. They know they will elicit some kind of response.
Sure.
Oh, they did this, and they, you know what I mean? And they use a buzzword like racist or this or that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to go to someone who knows character and is, so the people who we ask to judge are not going to fall emotionally to those buzzwords that we're talking about. What are other prerequisites to problem solving?
Meet face to face, as opposed to doing it by email or text is one of the worst ways.
Goodness.
And we actually had this situation happen over the weekend where there was a misunderstanding by text, and it almost led to some very, very.
You were starting to feel emotions. It was like, how could they say that? And it's like, oh my goodness, I did not express this well at all on text.
Well, now, that doesn't mean to say that the situation wasn't handled right, but the point is that the response was, okay, that's not what I meant. Everything is still, on according to plan. But in order to effective conflict resolution, we have things like affirm the relationship. Very important. It's just like, I value you. It's just that I'm not very happy with this. So we don't want to make it seem like it's an ongoing thing.
Okay, I'm dropping you now because I don't like you.
Well,
right now.
Friends do that, but in the cases of husbands and wives, what will end up happening is that all the past offenses will all of a sudden start getting, and then the person feels devalued. You can't do that. I'm upset about this particular situation, and we don't bring in all the past. Genuinely seek to understand. That's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Okay, and goes back to putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Lovingly seek to be understood. So this is how when you said this, that this is how it made me feel. Right. And own the responsibilities, sincerely apologize, and then step number 5, seek agreement. And so these are basic principles that really, if you break them down step by step, aren't all that difficult. But number 1, it takes an attitude of humility to understand that, what, maybe I was wrong, number 1. Or maybe number 2, that I need to understand where the other person is coming from. Perhaps I misunderstood. There's all kinds of different factors. But the bottom line is is that if we value the other person, if we are affirming the other person, in How to Have Power and Confidence in Dealing with People, it's a great book on personal relationships. They talk about the 3 A's: accept, approve, and appreciate. And if you go into any relationship, in any situation, with those 3 things in mind, you accept the person, you approve of this person, you appreciate the person, then it'll drop the offense down from maybe a 4 to maybe a 2 or a 1. And that, when we
Right.
think about it, it's not really that big a deal. And, okay, so my wife got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. She didn't have her tea or whatever. I can understand. Or maybe she had a really hard day with the kids.
Yeah, no, when we seek to
Yeah.
understand sometimes, and how many people I have heard say to me that they were upset with someone, and when they actually heard what happened and why the person acted the way they did,
Yeah.
they went, "Oh my goodness, I feel so horrible. They were
Yeah.
going through such a tough time, and I was being like a brat."
Yeah. So these are some basic principles that you can think about, and there's much more. And you listen, if you want some more valuable resources, you can reach out to us at schoolpodscanada.com. And we just so appreciate all of you who tune into our broadcast. And if you were blessed by this, we'd love to hear some testimonies.
Yeah.
And on that note, we've come to the end of another show. And so, as we always say, smarten up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smarten up, people.
It's the best way to do things. And we will look forward to seeing you on next week's broadcast. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for now.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.